You guys should be able to see Illustrator now, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It was fancy.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead on my screen. I'm going to open up the Illustrator file that I sent to you guys. And let me go in with this stained glass demo right here. Okay, so the next project, again, my Wednesday class is working on stained glass stylization with movies. Yours is doing the stained glass window look with video games. Okay, your first goal is to render everything in black and white. It is a line-oriented project. There's no color, no shading or anything like that. So you can see right here, the main goal when you are setting up all your line art is that every line should touch every other line, okay? You can see how all of these lines create these little enclosed spaces here. That's the key, is enclosed spaces. Okay, if you drew your lines like this, let me take this one and let me move this anchor point. If there is a gap like that, the whole thing will fall apart, okay? So you just draw individual lines like this, and then you move that anchor point so it looks like it attaches. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Regardless of what you're drawing, you're not doing fills or anything. Just every line should look like it connects to every other line because you're trying to make enclosed spaces. That is the key, enclosed spaces. Now, the lines can be different thicknesses. That's fine, but they have to look like they all connect. That is the key. I got to get that across. All your lines should somehow connect to each other, okay? Once your line art is done, you're going to close the line art. Illustrator is done, okay? I'm going to click Stop Sharing Illustrator, and I'm going to jump back and share my Photoshop now. And let's go into Photoshop here. Okay, so most of you should see my Photoshop now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the main goal with the project is once you have your line art done, you close up Illustrator. You're done using Illustrator. Okay, you're going to come directly into Photoshop and go to File and Open. Okay, on my desktop, I'm going to go to that file that I made right here for my stained glass. So even though I'm in Photoshop, I'm going to try to open my Illustrator file. Okay, and when I click Open, Photoshop is going to recognize that is not a Photoshop file. It's an Illustrator file. So Photoshop is going to give me this import box. Okay, the two buttons you're going to have to look at is your resolution should be 300, high resolution for printing. The only other thing I would suggest is the color mode is RGB, red, green, blue. That's digital color since you're going to be working on the monitor. Okay, 300 for printing in the future, RGB. That's it. Okay, and when I click OK, that's going to convert my Illustrator file into a Photoshop file.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you did 300, but it was still on pixels. Do you want it on pixels or inches?
No, Photoshop is all about pixels.
Got it.
So
Okay.
resolution is 300 tiny little pixels. Let me zoom in. These are, let me zoom in on an area you can see. These are your pixels.
Ah.
So if you cram 300 of those into one little square inch, you're going to get good detail on a printout.
Mm.
Okay. If you're in, let me admit everybody here. There we go. If you're in or downloading something from the web, it's going to be low resolution, only 72 pixels per square inch. That's why when you download something from a website and you go to print it, it looks a little fuzzy, looks a little blurry or choppy.
Mm-hmm.
That's because they're not cramming a bunch of pixels into a square inch. They only have 72. For printing, you're going to go 4 times that. So 300 pixels per inch. Okay?
Okay.
Here's something buzzing like, I don't know if somebody's trying to get a hold of me. So got everybody else here. Scrolling through. Okay. Any questions on that besides the resolution? 300 pixels per inch. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So what you're going to do is, depending on how you set up your artwork, you'll notice there are some gray checkerboards here. That is your transparency in a Photoshop file. And it's going to be hard to work when you have all these transparency grids sitting there. So what I tell people is, when they get into Photoshop, you take your layers panel, click the upper right corner. The upper right is your pop-up menu. And you're going to go all the way near the bottom to flatten your image. Okay, then you won't have that transparency grid anymore. It will look exactly the way it looked in Illustrator. Black ink on a white sheet of paper. Okay, you flatten out your image. Okay, the next issue you're going to have is, you cannot colorize line art if it is on a background layer. Okay, so right here on my layers panel, I can double click the word background, and it's going to ask me to name the layer. So I'm going to name it with what's on it. So I'll just call that line art, like that. And what you have to envision as you're looking at this is black ink printed on a white sheet of paper. Okay, the problem is, you can't put color underneath a sheet of paper. It would just disappear. So what we have to do for this project is treat our line art as if it was printed on a sheet of glass. We're going to paint under the line art. Okay, just to show you that, if I created a brand new layer here, and let's say I pick a shade of red, and I go to paint, I obviously don't want to paint above my line art, but if I pull the layer under, it's like putting it underneath a sheet of paper. The color is just going to disappear. Okay, so here is the trick. In Photoshop, on your layers panel, right above it is a bar that says normal. Okay, these are your Photoshop blending mode. If I click the bar that says normal and I set it down to multiply, what that's going to tell Photoshop, scratching around over there. Okay. What that's going to tell Photoshop is, in multiply mode, all the white areas will be transparent to Photoshop. Okay. I can still see the white because it makes it easier to see things on my screen, but Photoshop will not see the white. So imagine your page right now is printed on a sheet of glass. Okay. The other thing you want to do is, you never want to accidentally paint on this layer. This layer is just for your line art. So I'm going to click this white lock. You'll notice right underneath multiply, there is a series of lock features. And the one on the far right of that list is a big white lock. It says lock all. So I'm going to click that. Okay, I've renamed my layer line art. I set the blending mode to multiply, and I lock the layer. Those are the 3 steps. Okay, this layer is now protected. I can't move it. I can't accidentally paint on it. It's just ready to go. Okay, so here's what you're going to be doing. I'm going to zoom in on this area right over here, this big space right here. And my second tool down on the right on my toolbox, if I press and hold, I've got a magic wand tool. Okay, your magic wand is for large, flat areas of color. I would never use the magic wand on a photograph. I would use it on a drawing like this. So when I click right in this space, I've got little marching ants going right around that space. And the only reason why it only selected that space is because of all those lines touching each other. Okay? Here's what you have to keep in mind. The biggest lesson I could get across is, in Photoshop, your magic wand is good. It is not perfect, okay? Your magic wand is gonna get you started. So let me show you why it's not perfect. Okay, when you are looking at a file in Photoshop, you're not looking at a drawing. You're looking at those pixels. So I'm gonna zoom in on this little corner way up close, like that. And you can see that not only are there black pixels for our line art, and there's white pixels for the paper, but in between those, you can see these light gray pixels. Okay, those light gray pixels, they're called anti-alias pixels. And the whole reason why they are there is they trick our eye into making smoother transitions. So it looks and feels like we're looking at a curved line, even though in reality, there's no curves at all. Okay, so these gray pixels kind of smooth the transition between black and white, which is good visually, but not good when you go to color your line art in Photoshop, because again, your magic wand is good. It is not perfect, and it's going to recognize these gray pixels. So the problem that you have to overcome is once you use the magic wand, if I was to fill this area red, I would have a big red area, a light gray outline around the red, and then black. So all my colors would be outlined with ugly little gray edges, and that just looks really bad. Okay, so here's what you're gonna do. Every time, you're gonna have to do this hundreds of times, depending on how much detail you have in your line art drawing. When you select an area with the magic wand, you have to go to Select menu, modify your selection, because it's good, it's not perfect, and you are going to expand your selection, okay, by 1 pixel. That 1 pixel are those gray pixels you want to jump past. So you'll notice my selection is right on the edge of these grays, but when I expand it, now it's in the black. Okay, so I'm going to bypass those grays. That is the key to creating really good work here, is once you use the magic wand, select menu, modify, expand. You're going to be doing that every single time. There's no shortcut to it. You're going to have to do it hundreds of times. So you'll know it because you're going to have to do it again and again. Okay? But now my selection has been expanded past those gray pixels. So here's how you're going to color. This project has nothing to do with painting. Okay? What I'm going to do is go find images with a lot of texture to them. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. All right, blank screen. So I'm going to go to Google, okay, for my images of texture. Right up here, I'm going to click on images. And I'm just going to try to think of any kind of photograph that I know has a lot of value and information and texture and details, like a tree. Okay, because you got a lot of leaves and branches and highlights and shadows. So just like I showed you in Photoshop, if you take an image and blow it up, it gets worse and worse and worse. Okay, the whole idea in Photoshop is to start big and shrink it down. Don't start with small images and try to blow them up. They just get worse. So in Google Images, I'm going to click on Tools right up here. And then I'm going to come over to Size. I want to find large images to choose from. Okay, so I'm going to just scroll down this list here and try to find a decent image of a tree that has a lot of visual kind of information on the tree. So let's go with, I'll go with this one right here. Okay, so what I want to do, I look in the bottom left corner of that photo and it says this is 1700 pixels. Well, this image is not 1700 pixels. This is a preview. Okay, so what you're going to do is Control key and click on your image. Control key. And I should be able to open that in a brand new window. Right there. Open image in new tab. It's about halfway down the list. Control click on your image, open image in new tab. Okay, when you do that, it's going to show a tab right on top of your image right here. So when I click, that's my big image. Okay, I want the biggest one I can find. I'm going to pull that down into Photoshop for a second. And now I'm going to stop sharing my Google, and we'll come back in and share my Photoshop again. Okay, so now I'm back into Photoshop, right? Everybody got that? See my Photoshop screen? Okay. What I'm going to do is I don't want to paint leaves in this area. I want to paint color, and here's why. If I open up one of those stained glass windows that I sent you, notice on a stained glass window, there are no flat colors. Okay, every little shape is filled with multiple tones and values because you're melting glass, you're melting all this stuff, and you get blends and swirls of color. That's multiple colors. The nose is multiple colors, the cheek, the hair, everything. There's no flat color to this. So I want to try to mimic that look of a stained glass window with my colors. Okay, so with this tree, all I'm going to do is go to Filter, Blur, and Motion Blur. Okay, the higher I crank up the distance, the more it's going to smear those pixels. And I can smear them even more. So I get just a tone of values like that. Nobody's going to be able to tell that was a tree anymore. So I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to select the tones that I like. So right up here in my toolbox, the first tool in the upper right corner, I can press and hold and go to my rectangle marquee. And I'm just going to select this area right here. I like that bit. Okay, so the process is really simple. You go to Edit, and you copy that motion blurred photo. Then when you come back over to your line art, I have selected where I want my photo to go. Okay, here's the trick. You cannot just go to Edit and Paste because all you're going to get is the rectangle. Okay, what you have to do is once you have a selection area made, you go to Edit menu, Paste Special, and paste into the selected area. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's going to generate a window for you. You do not have to worry about layers either. This project will generate all the layers automatically. Okay, it's a really easy project. The hardest part is the line art. Okay, so when I paste into, it gets trapped in that space, and a brand new layer is generated automatically. Okay, first thing you want to keep in mind when you start coloring your images is remember, every time you made a selection with the magic wand, you said select menu, modify, and expand. Well, that's making your image area a little bigger. So now this photo is slightly expanding over my line art. Okay, so the ultimate rule for this project is nothing goes above your line art. Your line art has to stay at the top. Okay, you're tucking all your photos and colors under the line art, so keep that in mind. The other thing is your line art layer is the only layer that is set to multiply because we need to see through the white. All the other layers are just normal. Okay, so notice right here, I pasted in that little rectangle of photo texture, but it doesn't quite fill the space. So what I have to do is Command T to transform my photo. You can see a little boundary box around the photo, and if I go outside, I can rotate that box. If I want to blow it up proportionally, I just hold a corner. You can see how the box is getting bigger or smaller and smaller if I just drag a corner. But if I wanted to just stretch it to fill that space, I can hold my Shift key. Now I can stretch those lines to be longer and those lines to be longer. And I get that nice fill of space right there. Okay, if you are transforming in this program, Photoshop, you have to hit return when you're done. You have to accept what you've transformed or nothing else will work after that. Okay, and beyond this point, I don't like how these are creating really long, kind of really hard visual lines. So the motion blur gave me that texture, but I can go back with another filter on top of that and just go into blur and a Gaussian blur. And if I crank this up just a little bit, I can just soften up those lines a little bit right there. So I get a blend of value like that. Okay, so that's one. Okay, every time, this is the other rule you're gonna have to keep in mind. If you are ready to select another shape, you have to go back to your line art. Okay, you cannot be on this layer and use your magic wand because all it's gonna do is select part of your photo like that. Or if I click out here, it's gonna select around the edges of my photo. It's not gonna do what I want it to do. So you gotta make sure if you are on your magic wand, you better be on your line art layer. Okay, write that in your notes. Magic wand equals line art layer. Okay, so as you're doing this line art, you're gonna have hundreds of shapes. You don't have to fill one at a time. Okay, I'm gonna fill 3 or 4. So what I wanna do is on my line art layer, I'm gonna click this shape right here, hold shift and click another shape, shift and click another shape, shift and click another shape. Shift key lets me select more than one shape at a time. Okay, but again, every time I'm done with my magic wand, I have to go to select menu, modify, and expand it by 1 pixel. Okay, so let's say I've only selected one tree, like I've done here. Okay, my advice is once you finish the line art, take a folder and go out to Google and just start grabbing a bunch of images so you have multiple textures, not just one tree. Okay, so I would type in tree, I would type in ground beef, I would type in tree bark, fractal designs, rocks, things that have a lot of detail to them. Okay, so I'm just going to use this tree one more time. So again, edit and copy. I've got 4 selections now, so I can go right back again, edit, paste, special, paste into. And you'll notice it only filled these 2. Okay, the photo wasn't big enough to fill all 4 spaces. So what I have to check first is nothing goes above my line art layer. That's number 1. Second, I can hit Command T to transform my photo. If I go outside the box, I can rotate that photo. I can drag the corners like this and just blow it up really big, or hold shift and stretch and distort it like that. So I've got lines going this way and lines going that way, and I'll hit return. What I don't want is the same exact greens, because it's going to look like I just copied the same photo over and over. So I can go right up here to my image menu. Since I'm looking at an image of green, I can make some adjustments to the colors because they're both the same. I want to adjust those. And I go down to hue and saturation. Okay. Right across the top is my hue slider. So I'm going to drag that a little bit to the right. And I get more of a bluish tint to that photo right there. If I want it to be brighter, I can adjust the saturation right there. So it doesn't look like I've copied the same photo over and over. Okay, I'm going to do one more trick with another texture. So grab a totally different texture here, because I don't want to keep using the same one. And right up here, I am going to type in my favorite, ground beef. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to look through this, and you know what? This is an image with a lot of good texture. Also looks delicious too, but okay. Control click, halfway down, open the image in a new tab. I can click, that's the big image I want. And I'm going to drag and drop it onto my Photoshop icon at the bottom of my screen. And it did not. So let me go back in and grab my image one more time. Drag and drop it onto Photoshop. There we go. Okay. Again, I'm going to go up to my line art. You have to be on the line art when you use your magic wand. And I'm going to click this big space right here. Okay, again, I'm done with the magic wand. Select menu, modify, expand by 1 pixel. And now I go to my image. Okay, instead of using a motion blur for everything, I'm going to try a different filter. Maybe I'll go to blur and radial blur. I'm going to set it to zoom at 100 or near 100, and it's going to blast it out from the center like that. Okay, but I don't want this little dark space right in the middle of my stained glass. It's going to look like it cracked. So I can go to filter, blur, and Gaussian blur, just to soften that up a little bit more right in there. Kind of like that. A little bit more there. All right, that's a good texture. So again, my rectangle marquee, I can select this area of texture because I'm not concerned with all the dark areas around it. Edit menu, copy your texture. Now I come back to line art, and again, here's what you have to do, okay? Here's the glitch that you're gonna have to watch out for. You cannot be on a layer where the eyeball is turned off. Okay, I just turned off the eyeball on this bluish green. If you are starting on a layer where the eyeball has been turned off, edit, paste special, and paste into will not work. Okay, you have to be on a visible layer in order for this method to work. So if I turn on the eyeball, edit, paste special, and paste into will work. So watch out for that. You got to be on a layer where the eyeball is visible. And it's going to paste it into that space. Okay, I do not want those colors to look dull and brown. I really want to give this a richer tone. So I can go to image menu again, make some adjustments again, and go to my hue and saturation. I can drag the saturation to the right and saturate that color like that, but that's going to look really weird around the other shades of greenish tones. So I'll drag this a little more to the right. Let's go into those green tones right there. Maybe desaturate that a little bit. There we go. And now I've got 3 different glass textures right in there, okay? I'm going to do one more here. If I have this image still open, I can go to edit, undo, and I'll undo and undo. I'll just go right back to the original photo. I'm going to try another one. So I'll go to filter, blur, motion blur first, like we did before. Then I'm going to go to filter, and here's what I want you to be really aware of. Okay, when you're using filters, there is a field right here called a filter gallery. Do not use that. Okay, here's why. If I go to this filter gallery and I click on my distort filters, it only gives me 3. Okay, and that's going to limit my choices. I don't want to do that. Notice if I go to filter and distort, I get a lot more than just 3. Okay, so what I always tell people is go directly to the source of the filter. That is where you get the most control. don't go to a filter gallery. Some filters will take you to the filter gallery, which is fine, but I don't recommend you go right to it, okay? It doesn't work well. Go to the source, then pick your source. So I'm gonna go to twirl. And I can twirl this filter a little bit so I get that kind of a look to the glass. Now I'm gonna select that area again. I like this little swirl of color here. Edit and copy it. Now I come back here. I gotta go up to my line art in order to use my magic wand. And I'll select this space right in here. Select menu, modify, expand by 1. And now I go to edit, paste special, paste into. I move everything below the line art. I can take my move tool and move this around in this window if I wanted a few swirls, not that right there, which looks like wood grain. Maybe I move it over to here, Command T, and I can rotate those swirls to come off right in that space right there. Okay, again, that brown would go great for the boot. It's not going to work for the background behind the boot. So the main idea is find images of texture. It doesn't matter what the colors are because you can change those colors. Image menu, adjustments, hue and saturation, and I can change the hue right here to any value I want. Go in more with those greens again, maybe make the lightness a little darker, and we'll saturate that a little more. Okay, so now I'm getting all these different values and textures coming in, and you can go above and beyond that. Add a filter to that, like right here, filter, artistic, sponge. And I'm gonna get this kind of texture right on top of the filter that I did. So now I got a totally different type of glass as well, okay? So you have unlimited possibilities here, but you can see how I'm filling out that space. Now keep in mind, every time you go to edit, paste special, paste into, it's gonna generate a brand new layer and you're gonna get a lot of layers. So if I know that I have filled out the whole background and I like that result, I can click one layer, shift click all the layers that I'm filling the background with, and on my pop-up on my layers panel, I can merge those into one, like that, okay? Because you might get a Photoshop file with 500 layers. You don't need those. If I filled out this space and did all the background and all the boot, I would just merge all those into one, okay? And that can save you a lot of time as well, okay? First, I noticed my clock as I usually do in class. Any questions so far?
No, I think we're all good.
Yep.
Actually, I do have a question.
Thank you. What's up?
Just in case if there's like a very specific thing that I might have forgotten or like step in the process I might have forgotten,
Yep.
do your videos include this as well?
In your tutorial videos, in intro number 1, chapter 2 is all about painting comic books and line art. Okay. I believe there's something like 70 videos on how to paint line art. You will be an expert if you watch those videos.
All right.
70 videos.
Oh, wow, that's great.
So even though we're not together, I'm still with you all the time.
All right.
Like a Jedi Master.
70 videos on painting line art. So
I have a question.
I got you covered. Yes.
So if we have the right Photoshop brushes, can we just paint in the section and then put a blur over it instead of taking a new photo every time?
Yes. As long as it doesn't look painted. Like right here, if I wanted to, and you can do this too, if you want to accentuate what you have, I could click this little space right here modify and expand it for a second. And then I can come in with a brush, and let's say I pick a shade of green, and we'll go even lighter. And now with a soft brush like this, I can hit a little bit of a highlight, like right along that edge. Let it glow. I can accentuate whatever I've got. If you come in with your dodge tool or your burn tool, you could lighten up an area right there, maybe make a few highlights in the glass like that. Definitely. If you want to paint, what you can do is go to your line art, click a shape, select, modify and expand. And then what I would do in that case, if you're going to paint, make a brand new layer called My Paint. Okay. So if I come in with a shade of, let's say, more of a yellowish green right here, take my brush. I could mix in a few values here. And then right on top of that, I'm going to come in with like a bluish green. And we'll set my opacity way down so I can kind of paint within that. And then I'll come in with a darker green. And we'll just hit a few spots here and there. Kind of make my own texture. Like that. And then accentuate that. So I can go to Filter, Artistic, let's say Sponge on top of that. And I'll get an effect like that with no photography. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. I also have another question.
Sure.
So what if we don't play video games? Like, I have no idea what to do for this project.
If that is the case, because you and I are the same, I think video games are a waste of my time because I'm always obsessed with drawing. So I totally get it. If you have no idea about video games, choose a movie.
Okay, cool.
I'm totally cool with that.
Okay.
I would have to go to my 15-year-old son and go, can I have help with my project? Because I have no idea what these games are about. So I would have to go back to like Asteroids and Atari in 1980 to know what I'm talking about. So yeah, pick a movie if you want. That's fine with me.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. When is this project due?
Boy, at least a couple of weeks from now. Like I said, because usually what happens is next week, project 3 would be due, the tissue boxes. And usually you have a couple weeks after that when the next project is going to be due.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to be doing, like I said, this weekend, I'm going to go through my syllabus, take out a project, push back a few due dates, and I will update you with a brand new syllabus with longer due dates in there.
And then when we choose a video game, do you want us to go over it with you? Like, oh, I want to do this video game.
I would say any video game is fine, because if you go, hey, I want to do this video game, the story's cool, I would still be like, what's the video game? I don't know the story. I'm not a gamer. So I would say at this point, if you pick a game, you obviously know about that game. Send me a sketch or a layout of what you want to do in terms of storyline. Then you could explain, why is that character so big over there? Why are these 3 characters so small? Like, oh, those are villains that they're only in the first level or whatever. We can talk about it one-on-one that way too.
Okay. And then I know, third question, sorry, but I know you said you preferred like the realistic quote unquote video games, but now
Yes.
it seems like we can just do whatever.
I would say any video game that has human-like characters.
Human-like characters.
The Last of Us.
Okay.
Or, I don't know, what's a cowboy game that was really popular?
Red Dead?
Redemption.
Thank you,
Oh.
Red Dead. Yeah, Red Dead Redemption. You just can't pick like Mario Kart.
Okay.
You know, those are very cartoonish. But all the other games, Halo, Doom, Black Ops, they have realistic human-looking characters. I'm totally cool with that.
So for my project, for the video game I'm thinking of, all the colors are really, really dark, and it's a really sort of like gothic sort of game. So because I know you're showing really colorful things, so if it's like different shades of red, would that be okay? Because it's
Yeah, because I actually had somebody a couple of years ago, they chose the movie The Exorcist.
Oh, okay.
Like, you're not going to get cheery colors in that. I would love to see that window in a church, but Yeah, they made the most evil looking stained glass window, and it was dark. They just, you got to adjust your colors so the viewer can see them, but we're definitely not just going with bright, happy colors. It depends on the subject of the movie or game that you're choosing.
For sure.
I just happened to pick Wall-E. So I got to go with cheery colors on that. But yeah, the colors are obviously determined by the genre and the subject of the movie or game that you're choosing. So I'm totally cool with that. And if you need feedback, like I said, you fill in a couple spaces like this, send me a screenshot or text me an image or just call me and say, hey, can we do a meeting? And I'll get on there and we can do a one-on-one and I can take a look and you can share your screen and we'll get this to work out.